What's going on, Route 66 travelers? Hey, we are pulling off of the highway today, and we are going to take a rest stop in my favorite book of the Bible, the book of James. The practical jeans and t-shirt approach, the Proverbs of the New Testament, an opportunity in suffering. This is the book of James. He starts by saying, "Consider it great joy, brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds." Okay, you're kidding, right? That's everybody's response. I mean, James, you could have just said, hang in there. Trust the process. Stay the course. Would have been a lot easier to stomach. I mean, we thank God for a lot of things in life. But have you ever really thanked Him for suffering? You ever gotten on your knees and gone, "Oh, life is so rough, Jesus. Thank you so much"? I doubt it. But James is saying there's a cause and an effect in this. There's a reason behind it. He says in verse 3 that this is because knowing that the testing of your faith is going to produce endurance. And you can't have that second thing without the first. Endurance and faith, they grow together best when there's in a refining fire. And why is it that we have this cause and effect? Well, we got to produce a result. And so he says in verse 4 that endurance must do its complete work so that you can be made mature and lacking in nothing. So we hang in there. We allow those trials and we're made complete through them by enduring that. And that means that, number one, we see suffering as an opportunity for growth. It's so we can be better and not bitter. Now, some people, like James was addressing, they looked at it and said, "Oh, God's tempting me." When they're tested, God's tempting me. And they question God and they question the process and they moved a bunch of excuses and accusations and they turned God's testing school of suffering into the devil's prison of temptation. But we know this, that a person is tempted when he is drawn away by his own evil desires. See, it's not anything God does. God can't be tempted. It's our own evil desires that lead us in that direction. And that temptation, it leads to death. Well, if we look at it as a testing opportunity for growth, that will lead us to better life. The truth is, there's only three reasons really that any of us focus on going through any of these trials. Number one, we choose it. We make a bad decision and that's what causes it. Two, God led us into it. He's maturing us and He's growing us. Or the third catch-all reason, which is completely legitimate, I have no idea why I'm dealing with this. Well, as long as it's either reason 2 or 3, it's not your own doing. And we can choose to accept that with joy and we can choose to walk in it and rejoice in God. And it leads to this amazing promise. It says that the guy who stands firm in those trials, that when he stood the test, then he'll receive that crown of life that God has promised for him. And so we see suffering as an opportunity to grow. We also see suffering as an opportunity to help. In other words, you don't just stand there, you got to do something. And you can't do that just sitting around in a pew at church or sitting on the couch at home or sitting at your desk in the workplace. No, we got to get up. There's got to be an exercise to our faith. We got to be people of action. And James 1:22 clearly depicts this to us. This is my favorite verse in the Bible. This is my life verse in the Bible. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. It's James' call to action. And he also says that if you don't, you're only fooling yourselves. You're only on a fool's errand if you read it and you listen to it, but you don't do it. James says it's like looking in a mirror and checking yourself out, then you turn around and walk away and you immediately forget exactly what you looked like. And it's the same thing with the Bible. It's the same thing with God's word. If you hear it and you read it and you don't obey it, well, is it even a real thing to you? Do you even recognize the truth that it's producing? If Jesus isn't changing you, you aren't following Jesus. So don't just stand there, do something. Finally, we got to see suffering as an opportunity to speak, but it's to be a peacemaker, not a peace breaker. Man, this is a tough one, isn't it? I mean, the trials come, those difficulties comes, and words that we say can cause regret. We see it throughout history. It divides churches and families and friends and homes, and it's just so unbelievably painful and divisive. And James calls this out, and he says, sometimes you just got to shut it. Don't speak. Sometimes the best thing you can do is just be there instead of trying to be overly spiritually mature and making the other person feel like they're not as good. And James addresses the power of the small muscle in chapter 3 because he says, it may be a small part, but even a forest is set ablaze by just a spark. In crucial moments and in crucial situations, it's so easy for us to say things to harm and not help. And what James says is that wisdom that comes from heaven, it's pure, it's peace-loving, it's considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. We got to see suffering as an opportunity to gain self-control of our tongue. So James gives us cause, effect, and result. He says you need endurance, mercy, self-control. Consider it pure joy, my brothers, when you face trials of many kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And that perseverance, that endurance, takes its full effect when it's complete, and it makes you mature, lacking in nothing. So what are you going to go do about it? Keep studying in your family groups, individually, growing through God's word and his truth and applying it to your life. We'll see you this next week when we step back on the highway and look at the first of the 2 letters from Peter. That's right. We'll see you next Sunday for 1 Peter. Until then, happy studying.